My name is Clara Whitaker, and I learned the architecture of love on my 18th birthday. It wasn't a structure built of trust or mutual support, but a transactional arrangement of girders and beams where I was meant to be the load-bearing wall for everyone else's dreams. The lesson arrived not in a classroom, but in the stale, recycled air of our living room in Port Blossom, a town clinging to the misty coastline of Washington, forever smelling of salt and damp pine. It was a Sunday afternoon in early October, the sky the color of a faded photograph. My mother, Helen, set a pot of tea on the coffee table, the floral pattern on the porcelain clashing with the nervous energy she was trying to contain. My father, Richard, sat in his worn leather armchair, polishing his glasses with a deliberate slowness that always preceded a difficult conversation. My sister, Isabel, vibrant and restless as a hummingbird, was perched on the edge of the sofa, her gaze flitting between our parents and me. "Clara, darling," my mother began, her voice a carefully constructed melody of warmth. "You know how much Isabel's new venture means to all of us." Isabel's new venture was a boutique floral design studio she planned to open in a small, overpriced storefront downtown. It was the latest in a string of brilliant, fleeting passions that had included artisanal soap-making, silversmithing, and a brief, but expensive foray into freelance calligraphy. Each had been supported by my parents, with a hope that bordered on delusion. I nodded slowly, my hands clasped in my lap. "Of course. It sounds lovely." "It's more than lovely, it's a calling," Isabel interjected, her eyes shining. "I'm going to create living art, Clara. I'll do weddings, events, it's going to be huge." My father cleared his throat, placing his glasses back on his nose. "The thing is, honey, the bank requires a bit more security for the business loan. Your sister's creative spirit, well, it doesn't translate perfectly to a credit score." He offered a weak, apologetic smile. A cold stone of understanding began to form in my stomach. I had just turned 18. I had a small savings account from 4 years of working at the local library, a part-time job I loved for its quiet orderliness. More importantly, as my father had pointedly reminded me on my birthday, I had a clean slate. No debt. No credit history at all, which, in the strange logic of finance, was apparently a virtue. "Isabel needs a co-senior on the loan," my mother said, her voice dropping to a confidential whisper, as if she were sharing a precious secret. And we thought, well, your family. "You're the only one who can help." The amount, when they finally named it, felt astronomical. $40,000. A sum that could represent a down payment on a small house, a full college education, a future. My future. I looked at Isabel, her face alight with an untroubled certainty that this was her due. She wasn't asking for a favor, she was collecting a tribute. I pictured the loan documents, my name entwined with hers, my future tethered to her whims. I had seen her passions before. I had seen the boxes of unsold soap gathering dust in the garage, the tangled silver wire abandoned in a drawer. I loved my sister, but I saw her with a clarity our parents refused to possess. My voice was barely a whisper when it came out. "I can't." The pleasant atmosphere in the room evaporated. The air grew thin and sharp. Isabel's face fell, her brightness instantly extinguished and replaced by a wounded disbelief. "What do you mean you can't?" It's a lot of money, Izzy," I said, trying to keep my tone gentle. "What if the studio doesn't work out? I'd be responsible for all of it." "Don't be so negative, Clara," my mother chided, her smile now a tight, painted-on line. "You have to have faith in your sister. This is what families do for each other. We lift each other up." "Lifting someone up isn't the same as letting them stand on your shoulders until you collapse," I said, the words surprising me with their force. My father's face hardened. The gentle, scholarly demeanor he cultivated vanished, revealing the bedrock of disappointment beneath. "I don't recognize this selfishness in you, Clara. We provide for you. We give you a home, we put food on the table. Is it so much to ask that you contribute to your sister's happiness?" "My happiness doesn't seem to be part of the equation," I murmured, looking down at my hands. My knuckles were white. "That is an incredibly ungrateful thing to say," he shot back, his voice rising. "Who raised you to be so cynical?" I looked up, meeting his angry gaze. You did, I said, my own voice quiet but steady. You raised me to be responsible, to be careful. And this isn't careful. This is betting my entire future on a dream that isn't mine. That sentence was the final fracture. The polite fiction of our happy family crumbled into dust. The silence that followed was heavier than any shout. It was Isabel who broke it, her voice thick with tears. I can't believe you'd do this to me, she sobbed, burying her face in her hands. You're ruining everything. My mother rushed to her side, wrapping her in a protective embrace and glaring at me over Isabel's shaking shoulders. Her eyes were cold, her face a mask of judgment. If you cannot find it in your heart to support this family, she said, her voice low and venomous, then perhaps you don't belong in this house. It wasn't a suggestion. It was an eviction notice, served with a side of emotional blackmail. I stood up, the room feeling tilted and unreal. They didn't see me as a daughter. They saw me as a resource, a tool that had suddenly proven defective. That night, I packed a single suitcase. I moved through the familiar rooms of my childhood home like a ghost. Every object, the chipped mug I always used for tea, the worn copy of Jane Eyre on my nightstand, the framed photo of two smiling sisters on my dresser, felt like an artifact from another life. There were no dramatic goodbyes, no final, tearful confrontation. I left a short, simple note on the kitchen counter. I'm sorry I couldn't be what you wanted. I hope the studio is a success. I slipped out the front door into the damp, chilling embrace of the October night. The scent of the sea was a mournful perfume. As I walked down the cracked pavement of our street, the porch light of my home was extinguished behind me, plunging me into darkness. I didn't look back. I was 18 years old, and for the first time in my life, I was utterly, terrifyingly, and exhilaratingly on my own. My new life began in Seattle, in the basement apartment of a girl I barely knew named Lena. We had met during a summer arts program 2 years prior and had stayed in touch through long, rambling emails about books and ambitions. When I called her from a bus station payphone, my voice trembling and my suitcase handle digging into my palm, she didn't hesitate. Get on the next bus, she'd said. The key is under the mat. Lena's basement was a study in glorious imperfection. It was perpetually cold, with a network of thick pipes snaking across the low ceiling and a single, high window that offered a view of passing ankles. My bed was a lumpy futon in the corner of her small living space, separated by a thrift store folding screen. But the air was filled with the smell of turpentine and brewing coffee, and the walls were covered in her vibrant, chaotic canvases. It was the safest I had ever felt. For the first few weeks, I walked around in a daze, a phantom limb of guilt and sorrow aching where my family used to be. I'd wake up in the pre-dawn chill, the rumble of the furnace my only companion, and feel a profound sense of dislocation. I was an architect's drawing, erased from the blueprint of my own life. But slowly, with Lena's quiet, unwavering support, I began to draft a new one. I got a job at a small, independent coffee shop called The Daily Grind, a place that smelled of roasted beans and cinnamon. The work was demanding, steaming milk, memorizing complex orders, wiping down counters until my arms ached, but it was honest. Every dollar in my pocket was a testament to my own effort, untangled from expectation or obligation. During the day, I enrolled in introductory design and drafting courses at a local community college. I sat in brightly lit classrooms, the scent of graphite and paper a balm to my soul. I learned about lines and angles, about stress and support, about how to build something strong and beautiful from nothing. My homework was my sanctuary. I'd sit at the small, wobbly desk in our basement, meticulously drawing floor plans for imaginary houses, creating spaces that were safe and full of light. Each line I drew was a declaration of intent. I would build a life for myself that no one could threaten or undermine. I saved money with a ferocious discipline. I ate cheap noodles, wore clothes from secondhand shops, and my only luxury was the occasional used book on architectural theory. Meanwhile, glimpses of my old life would filter through social media. I'd see photos of Isabel standing proudly in her floral studio, Isabel's blooms, surrounded by buckets of peonies and eucalyptus. She looked radiant, her success a beautiful, curated story. My parents would be in the photos, too, their smiles beaming with pride. There was never any mention of me. It was as if I had simply ceased to exist. I felt a pang, not of jealousy, but of a deep, sorrowful understanding. They were living in the world they had chosen, a world built on pretty facades and convenient omissions. I was living in the world of consequence, of foundations and hard truths. And as the months turned into years, I began to prefer it. My life wasn't as beautiful as Isabel's, perhaps, but it was real. And it was mine. I excelled in my classes. My professors saw a quiet determination in me, a precision in my work that spoke of a deep, inner focus. With their encouragement, I compiled a portfolio and applied for a transfer and a scholarship to the University of Washington's prestigious architecture program. The day the acceptance letter arrived, I held it in my hands and cried. They were not tears of sadness, but of relief. It was a cornerstone, laid firm and true. I was building my house, one brick at a time. 5 years passed in a blur of late-night study sessions, part-time jobs, and the intoxicating joy of immersing myself in my craft. I graduated from the university with honors, my name called out in a vast auditorium filled with proud families. I stood alone in the crowd, clutching my diploma, but I didn't feel lonely. I felt whole. I was the architect, the builder, and the resident of the life I had made. I was hired by a small, innovative firm in Seattle that specialized in sustainable and restorative design. We didn't build sterile glass towers. We repurposed old warehouses into community art spaces, designed libraries that felt like forests, and created homes that worked in harmony with their environment. The work resonated with me on a cellular level. It was about healing broken spaces, about giving old structures a new purpose. It was the story of my own life, written in timber and steel. One crisp autumn evening, as I was sketching a preliminary design for a low-income housing project, my phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but the area code was for Port Blossom. A knot of apprehension tightened in my chest. I let it ring twice before answering, my voice cautious. "Hello, Clara? It's your mother." Her voice was different. The practiced warmth was gone, replaced by a thin, brittle quality. I hadn't spoken to her in over 5 years. "Mom," I said, the word feeling foreign on my tongue. "Is everything all right?" There was a long pause, filled with the static of unspoken history. "Not exactly, dear. We need to talk to you," she explained, in a rambling, disjointed narrative that Isabel's Blooms had closed 2 years ago. The initial success had faded as my sister's interest had waned. There were unpaid suppliers, outstanding debts. To cover the losses and prevent the bank from coming after my sister, my parents had taken out a second mortgage on the house, the very house I had grown up in, the one my grandfather had built with his own hands. Now, with my father's recent retirement and his pension being less than they'd anticipated, they were struggling. They were on the verge of default. "We just need a little help to get back on our feet," she said, her voice cracking. "Your father and we're so proud of you, Clara. We see your name on project articles online. You're doing so well." Then came the number. $50,000. Just enough to clear the second mortgage and give them some breathing room. I closed my eyes, the graphite pencil suddenly heavy in my hand. I saw the house in my mind's eye, the porch swing where I used to read, the window of my bedroom that overlooked the harbor, the garden my mother had tended with such care. It was the heart of my childhood, a place of both comfort and pain. And they were asking me to save it. To sacrifice the security I had fought so hard to build in order to fix a problem I hadn't created. It was the same request as before, just on a grander scale. They still saw me as a safety net. I took a deep, steadying breath. "Mom," I said, and this time my voice was calm and clear. "I'm sorry you're in this situation. I truly am. But I can't give you the money." The silence on the other end was absolute. "I have worked every single day for the past 5 years to build this life," I continued softly. "I have a responsibility to protect it. I cannot tear down the home I've built for myself to patch a hole in the walls of yours. It's a foundation I can't afford to break." "So that's it," she whispered, her voice laced with a new, chilling bitterness. "After everything we did for you, your answer is no?" "The answer is no," I affirmed, the words tasting not of anger, but of a sad, necessary truth. I have to protect my future. It's a lesson I learned a long time ago. She hung up without another word. I sat in the quiet of my small apartment, the city lights twinkling outside my window. There was no triumph in my decision, only a profound, aching grief for the family I wished I'd had. But beneath the grief, there was also a quiet, unshakable sense of peace. I had held my boundary. I had honored the scared, determined girl who had packed her suitcase on that long-ago October night. I had kept her safe. In the years that followed, my career blossomed in ways I had never dared to imagine. I left the firm and, with a small business loan I secured on my own merit, I started Hearth and Horizon Designs. My philosophy was simple: to create spaces that nurtured the human spirit. We designed shelters for women, community gardens in food deserts, and homes for families that were both beautiful and affordable. My work wasn't about prestige, it was about purpose. Success, when it came, was quiet but substantial. I wasn't wealthy in the flashy sense of the word, but I was secure. I owned a modest, beautifully designed condo overlooking Puget Sound, a space I had crafted to be my sanctuary. I had a team of brilliant, passionate people working with me. I was respected in my field. One day, an email landed in my inbox that made my breath catch. It was from the Port Blossom Civic Association. They were planning a symposium on revitalizing coastal communities, and they wanted me to be the keynote speaker. The event was to be held in the newly renovated town hall, a historic building that had been falling into disrepair for decades. As I read the details, a small, ironic smile touched my lips. Unbeknownst to them, Hearth and Horizon had provided the restorative design consultation for the renovation pro bono, through a community grant program I had established. My first instinct was to decline. The thought of returning to Port Blossom, of walking those familiar streets, was daunting. It felt like reopening a wound I had so carefully stitched closed. But then I thought about the theme of the symposium: revitalization, restoration, building a new future from the bones of the past. It was my life's work. It was my story. To refuse felt like a betrayal of everything I believed in. I accepted. 10 years to the month after I had left, I drove back to Port Blossom. The town was achingly familiar. The same salt-laced wind whipped through the streets, the same gray gulls cried over the harbor. The storefronts on Main Street were a little more worn, the paint on the seaside cottages a little more peeled. I saw it now not as a cage, but as a place frozen in time, a place I had needed to escape in order to grow. The symposium was held on a Saturday. The renovated town hall was magnificent. The original dark wood had been restored to a warm, honeyed glow, and new, larger windows let in the soft, diffused light of the coast. The space felt open, hopeful. It felt like breathing. When I was introduced, a polite ripple of applause went through the crowd of local business owners, council members, and residents. I saw them in the third row, my parents. They looked older, worn down by a life that hadn't gone according to plan. My mother's face was a mixture of shock and a strange, calculating pride. My father just looked tired. I didn't see Isabel. I walked to the podium and looked out at the faces before me. I didn't use my prepared notes. I spoke from the heart. I grew up in this town, I began, my voice even. I learned a lot about foundations here. About how a structure, whether it's a building or a family or a life, is only as strong as the ground it's built on. I talked about my work, about the power of design to create safety and foster community. I spoke about the importance of building spaces that allow for growth, that don't demand you shrink yourself to fit inside them. A home, I said, my eyes drifting towards my parents, should be a sanctuary, not a transactional space where love and support are conditional. A true foundation isn't made of concrete or wood. It's made of respect, of trust, of the unwavering belief that you are worthy, just as you are. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The quiet conviction in my words filled the hall. When I finished, the applause was genuine and sustained. My parents did not clap. They simply sat there, watching me, as if I were a puzzle they could no longer solve. Afterward, they cornered me near the refreshment table. "Clara," my mother said, forcing a brutal smile. That was quite a speech. Very dramatic. It was honest, I replied calmly. My father shifted his weight, his gaze falling to the floor. We lost the house, he said, the words blunt and stripped of pretense. The bank foreclosed 6 months ago. I know, I said softly. My mother's eyes widened. How could you know? I bought it. The statement hung in the air between us, heavy and unbelievable. My mother stared at me, her mouth slightly agape. A flicker of desperate hope lit her eyes. You bought it? For us. This was the moment. The culmination of a decade of silence and pain, of building and becoming. I could have been cruel. I could have savored the power I held. But looking at their tired, expectant faces, I felt only a vast, deep sadness. The revenge I might have once fantasized about felt hollow and pointless now. Healing was a quieter, more complicated architecture. No, I said gently. I didn't buy it for you. I took a breath, letting the words settle before I released them. I've donated the property to the town. My firm is overseeing its conversion. It's going to become the Whitaker House for New Beginnings, a subsidized residency for young artists and craftspeople who are just starting out. A place for them to build their futures on a solid foundation. My father looked as if I had struck him. You did that to humiliate us. To turn our home into a monument to this. No, Dad, I said, and for the first time, I felt no anger, only a clean, quiet certainty. I did this to heal myself. That house was never the foundation of our family. It was just a building where we all lived. A true foundation is something you build inside yourself. I'm just giving the house a new one. A better one. I left them standing there, amidst the murmur of the crowd and the clinking of glasses, their faces a tableau of disbelief and shattered expectations. I walked out of the town hall and into the cool, salty air. I hadn't destroyed them. I hadn't sought revenge. I had simply chosen to create something beautiful out of the rubble of my past. Months later, I returned to Port Blossom to check on the progress of the Whitaker house. The old home was buzzing with a new kind of life. The porch swing was gone, replaced by scaffolding, but through the open windows, I could hear the sounds of hammering and cheerful chatter. Young, hopeful faces peered out, drafting tools in hand. I was walking down Main Street, heading for a coffee, when I saw her. Isabel. She was behind the counter of the Daily Grind, the same coffee shop where I had once worked. She wore a simple black apron, her once vibrant hair pulled back in a messy bun. She looked ordinary. The ethereal, entitled creature from my memory was gone, replaced by a woman who looked tired but competent as she handed a latte to a customer. Our eyes met across the bustling cafe. A jolt went through me, a complex chord of history and hurt and a strange, unexpected flicker of empathy. There was no anger in her gaze, only a deep, weary recognition. She gave me a small, almost imperceptible nod. I nodded back. No words were exchanged. None were needed. The story was over. The debts were paid, not with money, but with time and distance and the quiet, painful work of becoming whole. I continued on my way, the warmth of the coffee cup in my hands. The Whitaker house stood at the end of the street, its new windows catching the afternoon sun. They looked like open, welcoming eyes. I realized then that I hadn't just closed a door on my past that day I left Port Blossom. I had, in the end, found a way to prop it open for others. I wasn't the girl who was cast out anymore. I was the architect of my own life, and at last I was home.